Well, hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. We are thrilled tonight to see you all here, and it's great to see some males in amongst the females, which is fantastic as well. And this is the first of many SWI heritage themed events, so a big welcome. Tonight we'll hear from two guest speakers. We've got Tara and Claire from Protests and Suffragettes. Now, they have both kindly offered to share their expertise and knowledge for tonight's session, so it should be really interesting. Now, Tara, and our artist name is T.S. Beall, is a lead artist and founder of the Protests and Suffragettes, which is a new social enterprise in Scotland. She has a passion for creative heritage projects, including our very own heritage project, which is fantastic. She has a great knowledge and understanding of how women have shaped the social fabric in Scotland over the decades as well. Her colleague is the Special Collections Librarian at Mitchell Library in Glasgow, and also a director of Protests and Suffragettes social enterprise. She is dedicated to the archival research and is absolutely instrumental in uncovering lots of important her stories from Scotland's past as well. So they will both take us on a journey tonight through a vibrant history of Scottish women, with a particular focus on inspiring stories of Scottish suffragettes. Tara and Claire will speak for about 30-40 minutes, then we will open up the floor for questions. So Charlotte is going to work the chat function. So if you have any questions either throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat box and or leave it till the end of the presentation. It's totally what you do. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tara in the first instance.
Hello, thanks so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Can I just get a wee thumbs up? And can you see the screen that I shared a little bit early? Sorry about that, Diane. I apologize. I was just trying to be ahead and not behind. So I'm T.S. Beall, Tara, and myself and Clare Thompson are members of a project and a new social enterprise, as Diane said, called Protests and Suffragettes. We're really honored to be here and excited to be speaking to members and also non-members of the Scottish Women's Institute, which, of course, you will know was founded over 100 years ago by the mighty Scottish suffragette Catherine Hogg Blair. The arc, just to give you a little bit of information about kind of the arc of the presentation, we're going to speak for about 40 minutes-ish, if that's all right. And we're going to share a little bit about our work on kind of historical women's activism, how we started sort of our journey thinking kind of more deeply about Scottish suffrage. We're going to highlight education packs that we've made on Scotland's suffrage history, and then we're going to talk more kind of broadly about women in history. So we'll speak about the suffrage movement, kind of the landscape of Scottish suffrage, the import of places like Perth and Dundee to the entire UK movement, and then we're going to share what we hope are some fun and exciting examples of how different suffrage activists from across Scotland use their creativity to help get to raise the profile for the cause of votes for women. I do want to also say that we're not going to go into great detail about force feeding or imprisonment or hardship, but we are going to mention those things. So we wanted to say that right at the outset, in case anyone would like to maybe step away for that part of the presentation. It'll be during the part that starts the landscape of Scottish suffrage. But before I tell you a little bit about protests and suffragettes, I really wanted to ask a question, if that's all right. And Charlotte, would you mind, maybe they can just put their answers in the chat and then we can come back to it. Great stuff. So the question is, how many Scottish suffragettes or suffragists are represented on big gable end murals across Scotland? Maybe you could just have a wee think as I talk for the next 3 minutes or so about protests and suffragettes, and then let's kind of go through some examples in the chat. So if you can think of any big murals of Scottish suffragettes, please just put them in the chat function. Okay, so as promised, a little bit about protests and suffragettes. We are a creative project. We started in 2013 and we became a social enterprise just in 2022. So we've been going for about 10 years. We are led by a team of artists, activists, and local historians, and we work to recover and revoice the histories of women activists in Scotland. Within everything that we are doing, as much as possible, we are trying to really recover and revoice what these women said about themselves. So direct quotes from them, not as much what people said about them, but what they said about themselves. And I also should say that we use the word women in the broadest sense. So that is inclusive of trans and intersex women. We're aware that those, that terminology didn't exist within the timeline that we are studying and we are working within, but we still assert that within the spaces that we have the privilege to host and that we kind of create in the groups that we're working with. We are based in Govan, and for many years we focused on just local histories. So some of you might have heard of Mary Barber, the rent strikes. We really focused on that for the first almost 7 years of our work together. We conduct archival research. We also conduct oral histories. We work with community groups and young people to create zines and posters and murals. So this is an example of a zine that we made, which is about Mary Barber and the rent strikers and suffragettes. And we create educational resources, which I'll share a little more about in a minute. We also host art walks in the public realm. And here's some images from those. We use temporary chalk paint to kind of rename streets, and also just a variety of other kind of call and response techniques. It's kind of like a heritage walk, but it's also kind of like a happening or sort of a wee event, and usually a really, really good time. We are currently finalizing our vision and our goals for 2028, which some of you might know is the centenary of the Equal Franchise Act. So that's the act that gave women electoral equality with men. So over the next 4 years, we have quite a lot of exciting things planned that we want to get up to. And I just wanted to share, we wanted to share 2 of them with you. The first links to murals. And how are we doing on questions? Charlotte, do we have any answers?
Yeah, there's a few.
Excellent.
So we have 10. And then someone said, is there not only one mural with around 10? And someone said 8, someone said 2, someone said 5, someone said 3.
Okay.
And then someone said 12, someone said 15. So it's quite broad.
I love the guesses. Well done. Well done all. Okay, I'm just going to keep you on tenterhooks for like 2 more minutes and then I will tell you, I promise. Well, as best we know, right? Of course, because so this is a temporary mural that kind of a poster drum mural that we were commissioned to do in the Anderson area of Glasgow. All of the activists on this mural campaigned in Anderson itself. That's the kind of design for the whole mural, like as a single rather than a wraparound. This is a permanent mural that we've done on Crosslone Road featuring Mary Barber and Isabella Elder. It literally overlooks the building where Mary Barber lived when she was organizing the rent strikes in 1915. But to get to our shared questions, the number, as far as we are aware, the number of large gable end murals, so big murals featuring Scottish suffrage in Scotland, is 0. So between now and 2028, we would like to see at least 12 to 15 murals go up around Scotland. We'd like to be ambitious about it, and we'd like to invite you to be involved. So please talk to your community councils, ask about commissioning murals on gable ends. Ask us to do some murals on gable ends. We'd be delighted. But also just as a way to kind of move these histories and these stories out and have them be more active in the public realm. Okay, I am going to hand you over to Claire, who's going to speak for a minute about our work with Wikipedia.
Thank you. Yes, we also work to edit Wikipedia, which we consider to be a form of knowledge activism, and we teach other people to do the same. Wikipedia is the fifth most visited website on the internet, but it lacks diversity in both its editors and its articles. So that means who is actually editing the articles and also the information on the platform. Only 19% of biographies on English-speaking Wikipedia are about women. So to right that wrong, we host free Wikipedia workshops in partnerships with Wikimedia UK, which we've done since 2016, and also Women's History Scotland, more recently online. And during these workshops, we open up our internal archive where we squirrel away all of our research that we've done, so that new editors can very quickly use our research to create new articles or improve existing ones about Scottish women's suffrage. So working with Wikipedia allows our research to be widely available. Those recovered voices and stories have increased reach and longevity of the information. So it's not just stuck on our website or our drive or within a zine, it's on the open web. And that's something that we're deeply committed to doing.
So in our most recent project, which was kind of August to December last year, in addition to running a series of public Wikipedia workshops, we also worked with community groups in Govan to create collages featuring the images and words of women activists. So like I said at the beginning, not what other people said about them, literally their direct quotes about their own work and activism as much as possible. And we translated that. We were working with people who spoke a variety of languages as native speakers, and we translated those quotes into 6 languages. We then made posters and postcards which feature these quotes from Glasgow Suffragettes. So those are some of the posters, and there's a whole set of postcards as well. That is these kind of posters, the postcards, all of those sorts of, you know, kind of the printed material is really part of a kind of joined up, hopefully, plan to get the word out about Scotland's suffrage history, which brings us to education, our educational resources. That's the last thing that we'll speak about before we move on to talk about Scotland's kind of suffrage broadly. So during lockdown 2020, we became aware that a lot of the history that was taught in schools in Scotland pivots around English activists and English events. So it's not to say that the Pankhursts and London and Manchester do not deserve their place within the UK, the kind of broader context of UK suffrage. They absolutely do. But as it turns out, there were activists in every single region of Scotland working to procure the rights that everyone here in this room this evening enjoys. So we all have the right to vote because these people fought for the right to vote. Each of the packs, we raised more money than we thought. We were able to create 100 education packs, and we gifted them to schools in every region of Scotland. You can see the kind of list of things that's in each of the resources. That research was done in partnership with organizations across the country. So we really were able, like partially because it was lockdown, it was maybe just an idea in the right time, we were able to really work with some of the most renowned scholars, but also really key groups in Shetland and Orkney all across, and they recommended activists to feature in the deck. Part of the education pack is this deck of Scotland's suffragette trumps cards. The cards feature activists from each of the regions of Scotland, but also activists who are from working class backgrounds who would now be considered LGBT, activists from the global majority, folks from different faiths, and I think crucially, the pack includes activists from both international activists who came to Scotland to campaign and Scottish activists. We've had really good feedback from students and teachers so far. We actually just had a tweet in the last day or so of images of students using the cards, and we're working to raise funds to produce more packs. We would very much like to see, which leads me to the last thing I'd like to say just about our work in terms of women's history. We would like to see every teacher in Scotland who would like access to these resources to be able to have access to them, to be able to teach about local suffrage history, because we really find that local history is very inspiring. it's very inspiring to think that, you know, the person who lived literally 4 miles down the road from you kind of changed the world. You know, they helped change the world. So, and speaking of people who have changed the world, Catherine Blair is one of the activists featured in our deck of cards.
Yeah, so we know that you've got a new talk about Catherine Blair on the 20th of March by Dr. Hanita Ritchie, which we're really looking forward to watching. So we won't spoil it for you. We're not going to go into Catherine's story, amazing story. But here's a really brief outline of her life. This is in a video shared by the amazing Glasgow Women's Library. They did a project to create videos about Scottish suffrage for their Vote 100 project.
My name is Catherine Hogg Blair, and I was a suffragette from East Lothian.
Can everyone hear?
I didn't participate in militant protests because of my young family, but my farm was a secret refuge for Scottish suffragettes who had been released from prison under the Cat and Mouse Act. I founded the Scottish Women's Rural Institute in 1917. During the 1921 census, I was so annoyed that the census would record me as just wife that I moved myself and my children to a nearby barn so the census form would have to show me as a person in my own right.
Okay, so with that on Catherine, we'll come back to Catherine Blair because we want to share a little bit about her in the census, which was alluded to there in that video. But as promised, we want to take a little bit of time and just speak about the kind of broad landscape of suffrage in Scotland, and maybe pull out some things that where you know, maybe areas of Scotland that you wouldn't already know. We didn't know until we started looking into it in more detail. Were really pivotal to the entire UK suffrage movement. Okay, so I thought we would start with the great Leah Leneman. This book is from her book is from 1993, and she says, I think very eloquently, the most extraordinary aspect of this story is the extent to which it has been forgotten. The equation of women's suffrage with London in nearly every book on the subject is a far more potent reason for the lack of awareness among Scots of the drama that was played out in their midst. Everything of note that happened in Scotland didn't happen necessarily in Edinburgh or Glasgow. Dundee was an active centre of suffragism throughout the militant period, and Perth was the focus of Scottish activity in the final and most intense stage of conflict between suffragettes and the government over the issue of votes for women, a conflict which was only ended by the outbreak of World War I. Without the courage and determination of the suffragettes, I would say, and suffragists who fought and suffered at that time, British women would have had to have waited much longer for the right to vote for their members of parliament. Okay, so, and with that, just to pull out a couple of threads. So I think we really feel it's important to remember that this campaign to get the vote for all women and for men who without property was something that happened it was almost a century-long struggle. So this image is from the kind of teaching resources in our education pack. You can see it's kind of a worksheet on the left side, the timeline, and you can actually see on the right, there's an image from one of the schools that has the packs now. You can see kind of in the middle right, it's there being used. But it's just important to remember you literally would have had grandmothers passing on their activism and campaign to granddaughters. I think it's also really worth noting that it was a very broad kirk And these people did not always get along. They fell out with each other. They fell out with each other marvelously, spectacularly, again and again. There were huge schisms between, people who felt strongly that there should be no, what we would now call direct action or extra legal actions, and people who felt strongly that they had been campaigning for 60 years using only legal means, and it hadn't gotten them the vote. So I think it's just important to remember that there were large disagreements within these communities and very heated debates. This is also just from our educational resource, kind of just mapping out some of the types of things that suffragettes did, suffragists did, and some of the things that they did together, like marching, like the creation of banners, the creation of music. They did a lot of co-fundraising as well. Okay. Right. So as Leah Lenneman said at the very beginning, just to really double down on that point, that there were, like, suffrage activism in Scotland really pivoted around places like Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, and Perth. Also very important, I think, to remember that between 1905 and the outbreak of World War I, approximately 1,000 women were imprisoned due to militant suffrage. So that's not the number of suffrage activists, hey? That's just the number that performed direct actions and were imprisoned. Activists were imprisoned across Scotland. That includes Duke Street Prison in Glasgow, Calton Jail in Edinburgh, Dundee. The Dundee prison was reluctant to forcibly feed prisoners, and Perth Prison, which unfortunately was not reluctant to force feed prisoners. And there's been a movie and a book actually about Arabella Scott, some of you might have come across, which speaks specifically about her really horrible experience in Perth Prison. So we're going to speak a little bit about Helen Crawford, who was arrested as part of under the Cat and Mouse Act in 1914. She spent 5 days in Duke Street in Glasgow, Duke Street Prison, on hunger strike. And the entire time that she was there, the WSPU, the Women's Social and Political Union members, held a continuous picket outside of the Duke Street prison. And that is an image from one day. So that was written up in a variety of suffrage publications. And there's a really interesting description that we wanted to read you about how the pickets functioned as part of the kind of campaign to get the word out and to raise support. Those who came to watch learned much of us because the pickets were a visible symbol of a central idea, the fight for ideal right and justice, and the courage of the suffragette. Participation in pickets also helped women who might have been hesitant about stepping out of their quiet home to learn to become more fearless in what they do. So Lenneman and others locate Perth, as I mentioned already, as the center of UK women's suffrage in 1914, at least in part due to the decision by the Scottish Home Office to force feed prisoners in the Perth prison. And part of that decision-making process was their kind of sense that Perth was sort of, obviously, this is just their opinion, right? This is not our opinion. Whether it was out of the way, that it was inconsequential, that people wouldn't notice. But exactly the opposite happened. And that is that the prisoners and all of the activism in Perth became a kind of a central source for press and public interest, as the WSPU demonstrated almost relentlessly in July 1914 in the run-up to the outbreak of World War I. And there were activists coming to Perth, like towards the end of that, on a daily basis on the trains, more and more people kind of relocating themselves temporarily in Perth to help with the campaign and to raise the profile of what was happening to these activists who were imprisoned in Perth prison. Catherine Blair, to return to Catherine, offered her farm as a convalescence for activists recovering from prison and from hunger strikes. And I'll hand over to Claire to speak a little more about another aspect of Catherine Blair's activism relating to the census.
Thanks, Tara. So going back in time a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about the census boycott. So you might have heard of it in 1911. Both the Women's Freedom League and the WSPU agreed that they would not put their name down on the census, the regular 10-year census, and as an act of passive resistance. So instead of writing their name, age and occupation, many women refused to be recorded or recorded themselves as suffragette, in a creative use of the census as an opportunity to raise the profile of the cause. And this, this was an example of what we might call non-violent direct action. So lovely Catherine Blair took part. She was noted as suffragette, and you can see the red line underneath her 1911 census. So it's and then the zoomed in part here, you can see it says farmer's wife, but it also says suffragette. So she wanted the enumerator who had knocked on the door to know that she wasn't really into this census. Another suffragette called Sophia Duleep Singh, she was the goddaughter of Queen Victoria and also the daughter of the deposed Sikh leader Duleep Singh, became a suffragette, and she expressed herself using her census return. Here's a poster of featuring her from her project, and you can see here her census. She's sort of scrawled all over it: no vote, no census. As women do not count, they refuse to be counted, and I have a conscientious objection to filling in this form. And then back to Glasgow from London, a suffragette called Janet Barrowman, who went on to donate a large amount of her suffrage memorabilia to Glasgow museums, refused to give her first name. And this is her here at a celebration with all the suffragettes that were still around in 1947. Really lovely photographs. And this is her census return here. You can see that her surname is down. So you can imagine this conversation between the enumerator and the head of the household who opened the door, who was Janet's mother. So the enumerator would, yes, I know her name, the surname's Bannerman, but she won't give me her first name. I'll just write a line. And she was then marked as a suffragette here in pencil, so that must have been at a later date. So you can see it was used, this sort of taking state information and using it to get their point across.
So in addition to the use of the census kind of in a creative way, I think lots of different suffragettes and suffragists use the census to kind of raise that or make those points. But in addition to that, we're really fascinated with the creativity of these activists, and we wanted to just share some more examples from across Scotland. And we really tried to pull, from across this great nation. In general, we find that young people and also the young at heart really engage well, as I kind of mentioned before, with specific examples of how women kind of raised the profile, how they fought for their rights, how they used their own skills with crafting. They had bake sales, they went on marches. Some of them who were musicians, they had sort of singing, they arranged, concerts. It was incredibly varied, but also really useful to focus in terms of kind of how we share or think about this. And I just also hopefully to inspire you to think more and kind of get in touch. We'd love to give more information to all of the local chapters about the activists that we know of. Really useful to focus on local activism. And we think that kind of inspiring change makers, the sort of, people, the next generation of people who might change things, but also folks who right now might want to change things, is something that's really helped by a kind of a local angle and focused research. So we wanted to introduce you to Jessie Cragen.
Jessie Cragen was an early suffrage activist, one of the few in this period and in other periods that we can describe as working class. She gave very engaging lectures designed to convince people of the justice of women wanting to have the vote, and she gained this reputation for excellent public speaking. So in summer 1873, after a series of engagements in Lerwick, Thurso and Halkirk, her lecture in Stornoway was stowed out. The quote in the paper says, "Nearly all the gentry of the place were assembled, and many were at the door who could not get in." At an 1880 demonstration in Manchester, she stirred the audience. And this is another quote, "Sending forth a voice that pealed like a sonorous bell over the vast multitude, till everyone had risen from their seats in one united burst of cheering." Despite these accomplishments and skills, her working class upbringing that began in the theatre world and her what was described as others as a large and ungainly appearance stood alongside her modest clothing to unsettle the middle and upper class supporters of the movement. And a lot of research has been done into this by a particular researcher. They were uncomfortable with her lodging arrangements when she travelled as a speaker. She would sort of, get cheap room. And she often also brought along a wee dog who was called Tiny. We have never seen a photograph of Tiny, but we would love to see one.
If you see one, let us know, please.
So this extract from a speech that she gave in 1880 really illustrates how she saw the common struggle of women from all social classes. "We are separated by many barriers of caste, creed, and education. How vast is the interval which divides the rich lady from the poor mill worker? But these divisions, though they are very real, are not deep or high. They are like the fences in the farmer's fields that rail off the crops of barley and that from that of wheat or grassland. But if you go down into the earth, you pass along the gallery of the mine. The coal seam runs along unbroken, and you never know when the boundaries overhead are passed. And above, the sun shines on all alike. We are too much apart, but they do not separate the hearts of womanhood that beat in unity, nor the sunlights of God's justice that shines down upon rich and poor alike. In the name of this common womanhood, we are gathered here tonight, rich and poor, educated and untaught, to raise our voices together, to ask for justice. Our sufferings have much in common." And in 1882, Jessie, you can see here an image of her joining a group of suffragists in St Andrew's Hall in Glasgow. And this is a sort of cartoon that came out in the Quiz satirical magazine, describing all these women who were on the platform. And when you read the letters in the quiz, it tells you that this little poster actually sold out. It was sold separately, and then it was sold out again. So people were buying these cartoons as a sort of souvenir of seeing these women speak. So I'm going to pass back to Tara to talk about another amazing woman and her exploits called Caroline Phillips.
Right. So Caroline was a journalist in Aberdeen, and her involvement in the suffrage movement really concerned her employer. She was working for a newspaper, but she continued anyway. Her activism included writing letters, writing articles. She chained herself to railings, and on one occasion, another thing we really would like to have a picture of, and at the moment we do not yet have a picture of. We're not sure there is one. But on one occasion, she replaced all of the flags at Balmoral Golf Club with flags in the color of the Women's Social and Political Union. So green, violet, and white. So she took all the golf flags out and she replaced them very early in the morning with golf flags in the suffragette colors. And while we don't have a picture of her doing that, we do have this really amazing image from Dornoch of a suffragette who, we're pretty sure this is not Caroline Phillips, unfortunately, being escorted off the links. And I'll just read that kind of description bottom left. It says, A.J. Ryle, club captain, with John Sutherland, secretary, escorting a suffragette off the course for molesting Mr. Asquith, Prime Minister, while playing golf, 1913. So the links actually were a site for a number of different sort of actions within suffrage. And this is an image of one of them. I will pass you back to Claire, who will talk about suffrage campaigning in caravans.
I bet you didn't know you were going to be talking about caravans tonight, hearing about them, but yes, some suffragists and suffragettes travelled around Scotland in caravans. And instead of me summarising it, I'm going to read again a really amazing report in an edition of the Common Cause, which was the newspaper of the suffragists, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies. For 11 weeks last summer, in the months of July, August and September, a caravan decorated with suffrage posters travelled through Aberdeenshire and Banffshire for the Scottish University Women's Suffrage Union. The caravan was kindly lent by Miss Louisa Lumsden of Aberdeen. The horse was bought, the harness hired, and the travellers, with one exception, were graduates or students, anxious to spend part of the summer in work for women's suffrage. The organiser, as caravan life was new and strange to all who took part in the tour, a man was employed to drive and look after the horse for the first 5 days, but for the rest of the time, the caravanners preferred to manage without one. 50 different places were visited and 58 meetings were held, some in fishing villages and towns, some in country districts and others in the more fashionable places by the sea and on the Dee side. Generally, the caravan moved on to a fresh place every day. Search was made for a camping ground, a stable and an open-air pitch for the evening meeting. The bellman, in one instance a drummer, was sent round to rouse people with bell and voice. There is no doubt that the caravan tour is an excellent way of spreading suffrage news in out-of-the-way places and awakening interest in larger towns.
Right. So how are we doing out there in Zoom land? Are we all okay? We've got 2 more things we wanted to share with you, but it's always good to just check in. We wanted to talk about, yeah, so is everybody okay? Those of you who have your camera on, maybe just give me a wee nod or a, okay, good, yeah. So far, so good.
Everybody's quite good. We are coming on to 20 to 8 now, so I don't know if you're feeling maybe we can do 15 minutes for questions at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got probably less than 5 minutes left. So it was just, yeah, it was just a check, you know, it's always good to check in. Right. So we wanted to talk a little bit and just sort of suggest that we think that suffragettes, suffragists and suffragettes, suffrage activists were brilliant media marketers. It's useful to kind of remember that photography was still fairly new at this time, right? Photography kind of came into its own roughly 1850s, became more common 1880s-ish. So come circa 1900, 1910, still kind of a new medium. Still, it's hard to imagine, but it's definitely true. Suffragettes, in this sense, you know, were brilliant about creating like dynamic moments with profound visual impact. So they all wore white. They had these incredibly complex sort of parade-like floats here you can see on the kind of right screen. They also did a lot of sort of dressing up in historical characters. So this is, you know, during a procession in London. Many Scottish activists went down to London for a couple of key processions. This was one of them. So Joan of Arc was there in the procession. They also had an entire section of different sort of writers from history. They had, you know, sort of royalty from history, different sections within the procession that kind of brought to the fore different aspects of women's history, literally. And they were really, really good at it. Also wanted to just make sure to mention the incredible skill and craft of a huge number of suffrage kind of branches. So maybe like a real genuine direct lineage and legacy from Catherine Blair to yourselves as incredible crafters. I know there's some amazing folks in the, you know, in the room, but these sort of incredible banners, these ones talking about these, these here on the left talking about, sort of women in history, but also sort of different chapters would march together. You see the sort of Edinburgh banner. And also online, just to point out that, we have the incredible privilege now, which wasn't necessarily true even 5-7 years ago, of you can go from looking at the sketch of the banner by the woman who designed it, to the banner itself here in the middle of Joan of Arc, to looking at, if you can kind of, it's quite small, but you can maybe kind of see in the middle of this image here, that's that banner in the procession in London. So you have this kind of incredible ability to sort of think and see how they kind of designed things themselves, which I think is very exciting. I'm going to pass on to Claire to talk about drama and the way in which activists used dramatic effect.
Yes, so a lot of time with women involved in the Glasgow School of Art, suffragists would put on masks or tableaus. So that would be something like people dressing up, trying to look like a scene or a painting, something like that. And you can see here some designs from 1905 by Dorothy Carlton-Smythe. This is not suffrage, but this is the Glasgow coat of arms mask. But they would all stand with their costumes on. Anyway, there was one in the Athenaeum Hall in Glasgow in 1912. And it was devised by this woman, De Courcy Luthwaite Dewar. There were various plays, and there was this really amazing, what sounds like a brilliant tableau, and I'm going to read again from the newspaper article. So this is called The Devolution of Man, and it was arranged, this particular tableau was arranged by Dorothy Carlton-Smythe, and here's some detail of it. The devolution of man covered a field ranging from the Garden of Eden to the epoch of 2000 AD. It portrayed women's gradual emancipation from a state of slavery until man is relegated to the place of a specimen, recently discovered and as yet unclassified, in the zoological department at Glasgow University, 80 years hence. Another tableau represented in the Bar of Justice in 1915. You can see this image here of De Courcy as a judge, and I'm fairly confident that that's a photograph of her as the judge. So women was a judge. They were the council, the jury, and the press in this imagined courtroom. Into the court were led by female constables, a stalwart sailor, a soldier, a swell, a navvy, a footballer, a curate, and a golfer. The defendants were found guilty, not really sure what of, but the music assured that the audience that the punishment fitted the crime. And go on, the next image is Dorothy Carlton-Smythe, who arranged the devolution of man. I'll pass on to Sarah for a wee conclusion.
Yep, so very quickly to conclude, in just about 30 seconds or so, is that all right, Charlotte? We're still good? Great. Just to conclude, we hope that you have been inspired by some of the stories and some of the things that we've shared with you this evening. As an organization and as a group of humans, we're really committed to raising the profile of these amazing activists through our work. And as mentioned in the start, by 2028, we'd like to see every teacher in Scotland who would like access to these types of local suffrage histories to have that access. We also are working to raise in general the profile, and thank you for the invitation to be here this evening to help with that. We would like to change the way suffrage is taught in Scotland, and we would like to increase civic engagement in young people and to really inspire the next generation of change makers. In closing, just to point out that the backgrounds that we have, Claire and I, are available on our Wikipedia GLAM page, and I think Charlotte can put the link in there, or we can do it during the chat. And if you are interested, and if it feels appropriate to yourself, you can support us by purchasing a poster or a postcard, the ones that we showed, or a deck of Suffragette Trumps cards. They're a tenner. And that helps to support our work and to help us to give more free packs to schools. Thank you so much. Please keep in touch. And if you would like to sign up, we have a newsletter that we're starting. If you'd like to sign up for that, you can do that through our website or through social media. Get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating, actually. And whilst you were going through your presentation, there was so much alignment to us as well, the SWI. So it was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Maybe could you stop sharing just now, and then we could
absolutely. Sorry. There we go. Yeah.
Questions. So I was shocked at the murals, especially in Glasgow and the Mary Barber thing, because I'm from a housing background, and I would have thought that would have been up there somewhere in Glasgow with all the housing associations, but it just shows you, and I'm really, and just for everybody's benefit as well, we've already had a wee chat about the SWI Heritage Project, and there's absolutely alignment and fit to work with yourselves in some areas of that as well. So we're really looking forward to that. So I'd quite like to open it up to questions, and oh, here we go. Phyllis is she's what, how can I describe Phyllis? She is deep into the history of the SWI and in her particular area as well. So she's very, very knowledgeable.
Oh yeah, thanks, Diane. I was waiting to hear what you were going to say there. I've got two questions. One of them is, my great-grandmother is reportedly supposed to have been a suffragette or a gist, we're not quite sure which, in Glasgow. All we know is there was something involving Hengler's Circus in Sauchiehall Street. How would we find out any more about that?
Well, I guess I know that Hengler's Circus was Sauchiehall Street, just down from the art school. The thing I would think about is like having a wee look in old newspapers, like the British Newspaper Archive, or local newspapers in your local library. But that would be so cool if something had happened in Hengler's Circus. That was a really big kind of arena, which they used to actually fill with water, and horses used to kind of trot all over it. So it's like a really fun. That would be.
And now it's the Weatherstones.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be looking at. I mean, we'd want to look at newspaper reports and, you know, check the 1911 census. Maybe she evaded the census.
Yeah, I've never come across any census evasions ever in all the research I've done. I was always 1921 I didn't know about, but I did know about the 1911 one. The other quick question I've got is Susie Cruz involved from up in Rossshire?
Susie Cruz, I don't recognise that name, Tara, do you?
Because she's doing a massive research project on suffragettes in the Highlands.
Good to know.
So yeah, Susie came to our very first the Wikipedia workshop, Claire, at the Scottish Oral History Centre in August. So we're in touch. Yeah,
that's good.
And good. we spoke with her also about sort of this issue of like archiving and access, like how do you, doing the research and then writing the book or creating the work, but then also how do you make that research as available as possible, widely as available. So I think this is, as within a distilled form. So, we were delighted to meet her in person, but also
she gave me her list of names, because when I was doing the SWI stuff, research of the women in Rossshire, I wanted to sort of cross-reference some of her names, but none of the names that I have were on her list. But it's not to say that they weren't involved. Husbands were, but
yeah. I mean, you find that you find these newspaper articles when they go around certain areas and do a talk, and it will say in the newspaper, we got 14 or 15 new sign-ups to that branch, and these are all names that may not be recorded in the archives anywhere. These women might have just gone along to a meeting and heard it, and sort of then done that kind of really quiet activism of talking to their husband who could vote, or talking to a friend or a neighbour who, just to get them interested. So these things go unrecorded.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Phyllis.
We've got Jenny Osborne. Hi, Jenny.
Hi,
Okay.
hiya. So my question really centres on Glasgow. I was born in Glasgow myself, so I know I don't sound like I'm a Scot anymore, but I wanted in particular to ask about the WSPU tea shop that was reported to be on Sauchiehall Street. And I was in Glasgow a few months ago and I walked up and down Sauchiehall Street trying to find the right place, but I suspect it's kind of been redeveloped over now. But I wondered if there was such a thing as a photo or an image, or where might I find a bit more information about that place?
Oliver, do you want to take that one? Or you don't have to.
It was, I mean, it's on Dalhousie Street, right? And I think like I'm sure I have seen an image on Google, but it's actually very recent information to me as well. Jenny,
Okay.
I'm so glad that you asked about it, because my question was also all about tea rooms and their relationship.
Brilliant.
I knew this, which is why I thought so. So do you want to ask your question, Oliver, and then we can try to answer both of them ish? Is that, or what do you fancy?
Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, it's really similar to Jenny's. Tara, I just wondered, like, at the moment, so I spend most of my day talking about the history of tea rooms, and because their rise is kind of parallel to the women's movement, I just wondered what existing research there was on the role that tea rooms in general played in women's suffrage, because I know that obviously WSPU have their own, but I wondered whether we would see suffragettes in Glasgow tea rooms and whether the women's rooms provided a particular space for that.
Claire, do you want to?
So me. Well,
Yeah.
so thinking about where they met, they tended to like they would meet in their headquarters if they had them, or they would meet in each other's drawing rooms if they had them. But I think the idea of tea rooms is quite interesting. I've seen advertisements in, for example, the Common Cause, which is the newspaper of one of the suffrage organisations, for Cranston's tea room. So I think it's understood that Catherine Cranston supported suffrage. However, it was in the archives. It's that she put an advert in the Common Cause, so she was really doing the thing that a businesswoman could do to support the cause. But I think, yeah, we could we should have a look at our archive and see if there's any. You'll be looking at adverts for meetings. Meeting at 7 p.m. this Thursday in whatever tea room. So I think it's really about looking at those advertisements.
Yeah, and I think also just maybe the fundraising, kind of the aspect of fundraising, because if I recall, and we haven't really looked at this specifically. So thank you both for those questions, because it's always so valuable. So I'm remembering, different kind of fundraising sort of events that were hosted in tea rooms as well, Claire, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, which is it's not about a tea room, but if you'll just indulge me, about tea in an interesting way. There is an image that we have in Partick of rent strikers picketing at tea. So they literally set up an outdoor kind of picket with tea, and they sat there as part of their rent strike in Partick with tea and looks like some scones or biscuits, or so I think there's like, I think back to that kind of creative use of different things.
Fascinating. Anybody got any other questions?
Anybody?
Oh no, great, go ahead.
Hello, I did just put something into the chat, but just to like the wider room. I'm looking for any guidance on anything related to advert about the dramatic entertainment in the Athenaeum Hall was wild to me, because I went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland as an actor, which is that original film thing, and I was like, oh my god, this is great, because I am writing a comedy drama half-hour TV pilot at the moment about Scottish suffragettes. So that's what
No.
yeah.
Amazing.
I've not got funding. I sort of went off of having read. So I played Mary Lee, the first woman that was force-fed in the fight in Lucy Wardsley's BBC docudrama, that won a BAFTA, which is cool as hell. But so I dived into like the research for that role, and then I read this book about Kitty Marion, who's an actress turned suffragette. Got absolutely fascinated because I do a lot of advocacy work for sexual assault survivors in my industry still now, so like not enough has changed, and I got so depressed with that story, and I was asked onto a podcast, which I've shared here if that's useful to anyone, to talk about anything we wanted to do with Scottish history. It could be something we knew something about, something we didn't, and I chose Scottish suffragettes because I didn't know anything about them. I wasn't taught about Scottish suffrage in school. I was bored as hell during history. They didn't relay it to, this is why you have an education and why you're sitting here. They just didn't relay it in that way. And yeah, so when I was going into Scottish suffragettes specifically, I thought, actually, I'd rather fictionalize this and use their humor and their wit and their tongue-in-cheek approach.
Oh, they're so funny.
Yeah,
they're just
like that. I didn't know that about the golf course. Like, the concept of like people playing bagpipes outside while they're recovering from force feeding.
There's tons. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been shortlisted for a few different things. I'm working on it. But yeah, and also I did put this in the chat, but if there's anything, I would love to sit down with you guys, but also if there's anything I can do as an actor, voiceover, anything for free, I will help the hell out you guys, because I think the work that you do is phenomenal, like truly phenomenal. I think it's incredible.
What an offer.
Amazing. Definitely get in touch. I don't see your comment yet. Forgive me. Maybe I'm just
No, it's I think it's come direct message to me.
Okay,
I was in the middle of responding, and then Joanne put her hand up. I was like, yay.
So Joanne, we've got our email in the chat. So just like drop us an email, Also because there's so much, like the thing with the golf course and the flags, like there's all these amazing moments. We just literally like picked, we tried to pick a broad spectrum of things that happened in different places in Scotland, but I mean, obviously we could talk forever about it. So
a meeting on the cards there.
Yeah.
And good to meet you, Joanne.
Yeah.
From the SWI point of view as well. So we'll certainly keep in touch. Any other questions just before we sort of wrap up? We could talk for loads and loads of hours. I know we could, but I'm just, other people have got other things to go to tonight. So yep. Okay.
Can I ask a really quick one?
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you. It was just to ask, and maybe you can also just, get in touch with us separately, but it was just to ask, given the kind of the information that we shared, are folks, because I'm aware we probably have people from all over Scotland right now, in the room, which is a really valuable thing, doesn't happen every day and in every moment. It's normal for SWI, but it is really special, I think, and worth saying. So just to ask, are there things about what we shared that, that you think are inspiring in your local area, or has it inspired you to think about, I don't know, doing, investigating things, where you are as well? So I've put you all on the spot then.
Yeah.
There's some thumbs up.
It might just be just a quick show of hands. Are you from the north of Scotland?
Oh, yeah.
You see them all, Charlotte?
Helen, Anne, Helen, Phyllis.
And
Heidi.
what about Central Scotland? Quite a few.
Jeanette, Joanne.
What about the
Jean.
South Scotland?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's very even
Kevin.
actually, the looks of it.
Uh-huh.
Very
that-
impressive.
I think it's useful regardless of where you stay, to be honest with you. I think that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Tara and Claire. Amazing. And really good to there are a few connections there as well. And we will be sending out an evaluation form if you can just feed back. It's really good to know what aspects you liked and what you would like to see in the future as well. And we use that feedback to design the calendar of activities going forward. And if you don't mind, just a wee ask, we are looking for volunteers. Phyllis, you're already a volunteer, so there you go. But we're looking for an army of volunteers for the SWI Heritage Project, which involves lots of different things: oral history project, a heritage centre, archiving, a multitude of different things. And you can do some volunteering from the comfort of your own home as well. So we're putting things in place so that we send you things, you work on it, and then we get it back. So there's opportunities for members all over Scotland to get involved as well. But please visit Protests and Suffragettes website. They have fantastic resources, information. I'm wanting one of your educational packs. I think that would be fantastic. And again, a huge thank you, and maybe could we have a round of applause for Claire and Tara. Well, and I'll see you at the next Heritage.
Thank you so much. It's been a total honor to share the evening with you. Truly an honor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That's interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, take care.